Okay, listen up, you sinners. My know-it-all neighbor Noah has started building a boat in his yard, rambling about some great Florida flood, and I'm not talking about the quote-unquote red wave. I'm talking about FEMA flipping flood zones. So let's wade through the murky waters. That is, what do the flood zones mean, and do I need insurance? But before we jump into the shark-infested inferno that is FEMA, I need to let you know that I am an unrepentant realtor. If you're crazy enough to become the next Florida man, then you should definitely sign up for my totally not a shameful plug newsletter. Link in the description. In Florida, flood zone helps FEMA figure out the likelihood of flooding in that region. Flood zones are used to assess if a flood's going to be risky, like eating a Waffle House risky, or like telling your wife she looks fat in those pants risky. And depending on the level of risk, that will affect what the Good Samaritans over at your insurance company are going to charge you in premiums. To drill down on this a little bit more, there are some high-risk zones and some moderate to lower risk zones. In the high-risk zones, we have A, AE, and V. These are determined to have a 1% annual chance of flooding and are also called the 100-year floodplain. There's also low-risk zones, or moderate to low risk, which are zones X, B, and C. And they all have subzones for different classifications. So when is it mandatory to muster up extra dough for your new Florida home insurance? Can you guess? I'll give you a hint. It's not the low to moderate risk flood zones. To make it as obvious as a Cape Coral car wash, if the property's in a high-risk zone, A, AE, or V, then you need flood insurance. All federal-backed mortgages like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the FHA are going to require flood insurance if you live in a high-risk zone. Technically, you could buy a house in a high-risk zone and pay for it in cash and then not have to purchase flood insurance. But if you've got that much cash to burn, you might as well invest in the Haktua coin. These high-risk flood zones have a 1% annual chance of flooding, which means that over the life of a typical 30-year loan, there is a 26% chance that the property will flood. Hey, wake up! I found something interesting while I was researching this video. That is, if the builder elevates the property up using fill or stilts, they can submit a letter of amendment, which, if accepted, would mean that the property could be removed from the high-risk zone on the map. And then your insurance could be reduced or removed entirely. One thing that I want to note, though, is just because your home is or isn't in a flood zone, that is not the same as an evacuation zone. There are a lot of good reasons to evacuate in case of a hurricane that have nothing to do with flooding. For example, a power line could fall on your house and start a fire. So with that out of the way, now let's take a look at a couple of the flood zones in the coastal areas of Southwest Florida. Okay, let's start in Cape Coral. This is my area, and we are in the Southeast Point here, also called the Yacht Club. Now, as you can see around the edges, yes, we have VE. That is a high-risk flood zone. Basically, the only thing out here would be maybe some restaurants or bars that are actually in the water or dock. Not much in the VE zone in terms of properties, though. But if you look, all this is in the AE zone. Okay, AE zone is a high-risk zone. So you would need flood insurance. Now, you will see something here like this little isolation here. This is an X zone. Okay, 500 flood year included elevation. That means that this is not in a high-risk flood zone. In this case, this is the it's a municipal property. So they actually have a levee or something there protecting that property. But you can see here, if I scroll out, take a look at some of these other areas. So for example, I mean, we're right here by the ocean or by the river, but even within this little area, all these little properties are outside the high-risk flood zone. So right here, AE, these are high-risk properties. So if I even click on one of these properties in here, okay, I can, let's see, click on a property here. So right here, this looks like a single family resident. I can look at that listing and it will say on the flood map part of it that this is in a flood zone. It is not. It is not in a special high flood area. Now, it is within 250 feet of a flood zone, so that may affect things. But do you have to have insurance? No, you don't, because you're not in the flood zone. So that's how that works. So if you are in the flood zone. So some of these areas, if you go further inland, you can see these are levee protected. So while this property right next door, these look like condos to me, but while the property next door might be in a flood zone, if your property is in one of these areas, you may or may not. Now this one's kind of cutting right through the property, so you still might need it. But like one that's still completely inside here, this one would not be in a flood zone, right? And let's take a look. Indeed, we go to the flood map. And check this out, it is out of the flood zone. So that's exactly what you want if you're buying a property. Now, that doesn't mean all these properties are no good. They're still good. You're just gonna have to pay for flood insurance. That's just part of the game. So yeah, if you don't, but look, if you're buying a property right here on the water, you know, you're probably more interested in the lifestyle that affords you. Having a boat that can go straight out to the ocean, that's what you're looking for, the extra cost of the insurance. Okay, so we'll look at one more. This was a current listing, see, and it is in a high flood zone. We'll click on it, our high risk flood zone, and here's the flood map. And in fact, it is in that flood zone. So this just gives you an idea. Let's go back now. We are gonna go back. And let's zoom out. Let's take a look at Naples. I do a lot of business in Naples, so I want to pull it down here. A lot of my past clients are in Naples. Okay, Vanderbilt Beach. Let's take a look. Yep, all flood zone. All these are flood zone. But I mean, is that any surprise? All these are meant to be water accessible to get you out to the coast, to the Gulf of Mexico, or the Gulf of America as they're calling it now. But here we go. We have the X zones. These X zones, they're not. These are out of the special flood zone area. So you don't need them in this area. So you could have one property that you do and one property that you don't. It just kind of depends on the flood map here. So we'll come down here to Park Shore. This is a super nice area in Naples. But let's take a look. So in here, look, we've got some property that is. And I don't see any specific buildings on here. Oh, a condo. We've got a condo in there. So that one is, part of that condo looks like it's outside of the flood zone. But everything else is, of course. And that makes sense, right? You're literally on the water here of the Gulf. So there's not, like in Cape Coral, you're kind of protected because you've got these islands here. And these islands, yeah, most of the properties on the island are in a flood zone. And that's just the reality of how flood zones work in Southwest Florida. One more place I want to check. Let's see if we've got the flood zones here. We're going to check over here in... So one more place I did want to show you is over here at Indian Creek. And as you can see, Indian Creek, this is where Jeff Bezos moved. And basically all the properties in this 41 property development, they just skyrocketed because he moved there and everybody wants to move next to him. See each other on the golf course. Tom Brady bought in here, but he's considering selling right now. So we'll see if that pans out. But you can see most, if not all of these lots are in the flood zone. But a large portion of the golf course is not. So probably the, wherever they have the village, the country club, the actual building there is not in a flood zone. So yeah, that just gives you an idea of what flood zones are in Florida and what they mean. Thanks for watching, you guys. If you like this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up, and I will talk to you next time. Take care.